All right, let's talk about something huge in the world of data, the data lakehouse. Now, I know, it sounds super technical, right? But honestly, it's all about solving one giant, expensive headache that companies have been wrestling with for decades. So let's break it down.
It really all boils down to this one question. Have you ever wondered why this is so hard? For years and years, companies have been dumping millions of dollars into data systems that are slow, ridiculously complicated, and honestly, they just don't play well together. It's this universal pain point, and it's the exact reason the Lakehouse was even invented.
So, for the longest time, companies were basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. See, on one side, you had the data warehouse. The best way to think of it is a fancy, expensive library. Everything is perfectly organized, but it's super rigid and costs a fortune. On the other side, you had the data lake, kind of like a cheap, messy garage where you can just throw anything and everything. The real nightmare started when companies tried to use both at the same time, constantly shuffling data back and forth, making copies of everything, and just watching the costs spiral out of control.
To really get why the lakehouse is such a game changer, we kind of have to understand how we got into this whole library and garage mess to begin with.
The story really has two main chapters. First, you have the 90s, which was all about order. This was the era of the data warehouse. Then, fast forward to the 2010s. With cheap cloud storage everywhere, it suddenly became the age of anything goes, and the data lake was born.
So let's zoom in on that fancy library, the data warehouse. It was fantastic for what we called structured data. You know, stuff that fits perfectly into neat tables and spreadsheets, like customer names or sales figures. And man, it was fast. But, and this is a big but, it was incredibly expensive, it couldn't handle modern data like images or videos, and you were always running out of space.
And then, the messy garage came along, the data lake. And it was the complete opposite. It was dirt cheap, you had unlimited space, and you could throw literally anything in there. Videos, server logs, social media posts, you name it. The catch? It was an absolute chaotic mess. Trying to find anything useful in there was slow and painful. It got so bad people started calling it the data swamp.
So, what did companies do? Naturally, they tried to get the best of both worlds. They thought, hey, let's use the organized library and the cheap garage. But instead of getting a perfect solution, they created a complete and total nightmare for themselves. Yeah, this two-system thing was a disaster. First off, you had to store the same exact data in two different places. Talk about expensive. Then moving it back and forth was slow and super complicated. And trying to make sure everything was in sync, just a constant, massive headache. Simple questions this should have taken, minutes to answer, were now taking days.
And you can just imagine the conversations, right? This became a painfully common scenario. An analyst needs fresh sales data, but to get it, they first have to dig through the messy lake, try to clean it up, and then manually move it over to the warehouse. What should have been a simple task turns into this multi-day slog. It was just pure grinding inefficiency.
But what if you didn't have to choose between the library and the garage? What if you could have a single smart house that gave you the absolute best of both? Well, that is the big idea behind the Lakehouse.
And here's the more official definition. A data lakehouse is a new unified system. It takes the cheap, flexible storage you love from the data lake, but it builds the powerful, fast, and reliable features of a data warehouse right on top of it. It's one system to rule them all.
And this right here is the crucial takeaway. With this smart house, you are no longer forced to make a compromise. You get the cheap, limitless storage of the garage, plus the speed and organization of the library, all together in one place.
Okay, so you might be wondering, how is this even possible? How does this work? Well, the magic behind this whole lakehouse architecture is an open-source technology called Delta Lake. Let's take a look at the secret sauce.
First thing, and this is huge, it brings reliability. Delta Lake gives you something called ACID transactions. The best way to think of it is like a bank transfer. Without it, if a job crashes halfway through, your data gets corrupted. The money just vanishes. But with ACID, the entire thing either works perfectly or it fails completely and rolls back like it never even happened. Your data is always safe and consistent.
All right, next up is one of the coolest features, I'm not kidding, time travel. Delta Lake automatically keeps a full history of every change you make to your data. So if someone makes a huge mistake, like, whoops, I just deleted 1 million customer records, it's not a catastrophe. You can literally time travel back to the version from 5 minutes ago and get everything back instantly. How cool is that?
And finally, it keeps your data clean from the get-go with something called schema enforcement. Think of it like a bouncer at a really exclusive club. A regular data lake just lets anyone in, right? And that leads to a messy party with all kinds of inconsistent data. But Delta Lake? It checks everyone at the door. If the data doesn't match the guest list, the format you expect, it gets rejected. It can't even get in. This guarantees your data stays high quality always.
Okay, that all sounds great in theory, but what does this actually look like when the rubber meets the road? Let's check out the impact it had for a fictional e-commerce company that we're going to call Shop Now.
First, let's talk about the money. The cost savings were just insane. By ripping out their old, complicated systems and putting in a single lakehouse, Shop Now slashed their monthly data costs by 90%. It went from $50,000 a month all the way down to just $5,000. And what about speed? Well, a critical report that used to take their team 45 agonizing minutes to run now completes in just 10 seconds. That's not just a small improvement. That's a total revolution in how fast they can make decisions.
And here's the kicker. When you factor in all the money they saved on engineering time, people not having to constantly fix broken data pipelines, their total monthly operating costs fell by an incredible 92%. And here it is, the complete side-by-side. I mean, look at this. Before, you see super high costs and painfully slow queries. Their data was a day old, and the system was only reliable 95% of the time. But after moving to the Lakehouse, every single one of those metrics is transformed. Costs are way down, queries are almost instant, the data is fresh, and reliability is nearly perfect. It's a complete overhaul.
So, why does all of this matter to you? Well, because it represents a fundamental shift. We're moving towards a simpler, smarter, and way more unified future for how we handle data.
So let's just recap. All those old nagging problems, having to duplicate your data, waiting forever for answers, dealing with bad quality, the Lakehouse architecture has a direct solution for every single one. You store data once, it's built for speed. And features like ACID transactions and schema enforcement make sure it's always reliable. It's a direct fix for the pain points of the last 20 years. So I'll just leave you with this thought. If you could have one perfect system that combines the very best of everything, the flawless organization of a library, and the infinite cheap space of a garage, why would you ever choose to live in two separate, messy, and expensive houses?